this slideshow, I'll be discussing the details, expectations, and some examples regarding the final project. So this slideshow is posted in week 4, so we're halfway through the quarter, obviously, and I want to make sure or strongly encourage you to begin working on the final project, because some of the parts that you'll want to implement in your sessions are going to be coming up in week 5 and week 6. So if you're kind of starting to build this and work on it as you go, you won't be left to the last week to doing all the work. The project description and overview. Okay, you'll also find not the same information, but information posted. There's a Word document posted, I think in the in D2L describing the project, and then there's also a grading rubric, so it really explains where the points will be allocated for the different aspects or the different components of the project. So the final project for this class is to design four separate oral rehabilitation sessions that you could actually present to individuals. We'll be focusing on the aspects that make up these sessions throughout the quarter, obviously. You will be utilizing, or I want you to utilize, handouts, information gathered from the class lecture. You can use internet sources, you can use your textbook, you could use other textbooks that you feel that you've had in other courses that may be applicable, and you will formulate your own 4-session detailed plan that could be implemented to participants. And just to kind of give you an overview, the way to think about this is, for example, if you were structuring it similar to the classes that we held in Arizona, we're going to talk about the different demographics, but to kind of put it into a framework, I as the professor or the coordinator of the program would go to senior centers and talk to the coordinators at the senior centers and make sure they were interested. Then we would schedule out a couple months in advance a 6 to 8 week weekly hour and 15-minute time, and then the senior center, the site, would begin advertising. They would post it in their newsletter, they'd post signs up around the center, they would advertise it in other classes, they would put it on their website. And another really kind of cool thing that we did was at the senior centers in Arizona, they also were able to have lunch there, and at one point we made flyers for, and you don't have to do this for your sessions, but I'm just trying, unless you want to, but I'm trying to put it into a framework. We use those as placemats, as advertisements. So assume that would be how this would be structured. There would be a recruiting, it would be set up. So your goal is, or your mission is, to design 4 sessions that could actually be implemented with participants, and we'll talk about the different demographics, the different populations that you could decide to work with, hopefully of what population really interests you, whether or not you are planning on going into audiology, and I know most of you are not. So here's a general outline of the requirements, and then we're going to talk about each one. Obviously a cover sheet, I'd like an introduction, a detailed outline of session 1, session 2, session 3, session 4, handouts, one handout designed for participants in each of these sessions. So if you're going to do the session number 1, you're going to give a handout to those participants that's applicable to the information you were focusing on the session, and I want a copy of that handout. That will be included in what you put in the Dropbox. So we'll talk about that too. Excuse me. What I also am going to request from you is a sorry. What I'm also going to is what also is required is and we're going to get into that too, but a survey of your participants. So you're going to design a survey to find out where their interests lie, and you're also going to choose a self-assessment that you want your the people in your participants to complete. So self-assessments, different types of self-assessments, we are going to be talking about in upcoming weeks also. Then you'll also do a concluding statement and then a bibliography, or actually a resources page. So let's get into the details of that. So, before we get into the details, you may choose to work with the population or the demographic that you find most interesting, and here are your options. You may choose to work with an adult population. You could work with working with adults that are on the older end of the spectrum, maybe 65 or 75 and older. So this demographic would be senior citizens, elderly individuals, retired population, and of course their spouses, family members, or caregivers. So remember, in our last slideshow we talked about the psychological, psychosocial, lifestyle differences between populations. So when you are designing your 4 sessions, once you describe the population you choose, your sessions and the material, so for example your topics and the handout you give at each session, has to be appropriate to that population. Excuse me. You could also work with, or another choice would be, an adult population that is a little younger than our senior or retired population. So working with a younger demographic than listed above. This would be working with maybe 30-year-olds to 65-year-olds who have hearing impairment. Okay, so working adults typically. You could choose a young adult population. So this population would focus more on college age, graduate student age, early in the career age, that group. And again, the materials that you would present to this young adult population maybe are going to be different, or going to have a different take on the first population we discussed, the senior elderly. For example, when you're working with this senior population, a concern is going to be hearing loss limiting their independence, right? This is not going to be the case with a young adult population. This could be more for issues related to being desirable in the workforce, struggling in classroom settings in a university setting. So they're going to have different needs. So that, again, the material is going to have to be geared towards that population. Another really interesting group that's fun to work with, or fun to think about working with, would be the teenage adult population. For example, high school age, particularly as they transition to college or the workforce. Remember, when we talked about this population in the last sets of slides, it was very heavily focused on going from being completely reliant on parents working out hearing aids and appointments and anything they needed, to teachers following up, to all of a sudden you needing to find the sources that you need, whether it's vocational rehabilitation or applying for assistance through the school, or accommodations is what I'm looking for, and following up yourself with related to health insurance and appointments for hearing aid issues. Also the pediatric population, which is going to be a trickier one for the purpose of this course. So I'm not saying that you can't do it. It's a little trickier because really the bulk of our oral rehab is more working with adults, where when we work with the pediatric population, it still could be under the umbrella of oral rehabilitation, but it's really more counseling and support for parents and caregivers. But again, I don't want to deter you if that's where your interests lie. So for this demographic, you would choose appropriate information that would be geared toward parents and caregivers. So how would you plan out 4 hour and 15 minutes sessions with parents of toddlers who are hearing impaired, or parents and caregivers are of newly identified infants or newborns with hearing impairment. Okay, so this is a really interesting population that you might want to work with. And again, I said we will be discussing the specific needs of each of the above, and we really already have covered that. If you're struggling with populations or what materials to use, please feel free to email me or call me, or we could set up a phone time anytime. Sorry about these slides. I didn't correct the margins here. So now let's review the components and the details of the project. One thing to note is the entire project, obviously, since this is an online course, is to be submitted in a Word document via the assignment Dropbox in D2L by the due date. This project is worth 50% of your grade, so by not turning in would obviously result in a failure in the course. So you will basically be working on, over the course of the next 4.5 weeks, or 4 weeks, kind of a live document that you just keep adding to and modifying and kind of putting together. So again, this will be submitted. Your entire Word document from the cover page to the resource page, including the handouts, should be written in a Word document and submitted via the assignment Dropbox. If for some reason you are concerned that your assignment didn't go into the Dropbox, then please also email me, because if I don't see it in the Dropbox, then it's going to be a grade of 0. It's going to be difficult to basically not possible to accept late assignments, since this is something that we've been working on throughout the quarter. So if there is an issue, you're going to have to discuss that with me for prior approval. So the next point, for simplicity's sake, you may use reference handouts in your session-to-session outline and then add them in as attachments. So remember, I said that in each of your 4 sessions, you need to either pull something from the internet or create a handout. And remember, when I say pull something from the internet, anything you pull from the internet has to be cited in your reference list. Otherwise, you're making it's the assumption that you wrote it, that it's your own work. So please be very cautious of that and reference anything that you pull from the internet. So again, for simplicity's sake, in your Word document you would have your cover sheet, and then your next page, your introduction statement, and then you'd have session to session, so 4 sessions. So then you would have all the information, all the outlines for each of your session. But you'll also have a reference to, I'm sorry. Okay, let's back up. Okay, so you'll have a Word document that will start off with your cover sheet and then your introduction, and after your introduction you'll state which of the self-assessment, the different self-assessments we've talked about, or something we haven't talked about, perhaps that you found on the internet. You will name it, you'll describe it, and why you chose it. Okay, and then you'll have all 4 of your sessions with detailed outlines of what you'll go over. Then you'll have your conclusion and your resources. Then you will add in, or you would also put in your your handouts. Actually, as I'm thinking about it, I'm talking and thinking about it at the same time. You could do it either way. You can copy and paste in the handouts you use after each session or within the body of each session, or put them in at the end, whichever works first. Whichever works best. Okay, the next part. With the exception of the handouts as mentioned above, everything else should flow as a term paper format from cover sheet, introduction, session by session, concluding statement, and resources. So really, however it works best for you. So let's talk about the components, and then maybe this will clarify. In your cover sheet, obviously your full name, the title of this course, the course number, the project title, which is Oral Rehabilitation Final Project, and then the date. And you can either use the due date or the date of you submitted it is fine. Your introduction statement, and again, this should be written more in like a paper, a term paper format. Given the definitions discussed in class, in your text, and internet sources, I would like you to define oral rehabilitation, specifically how you would utilize that terminology in the programs or the sessions that you're going to offer. Okay, so remember, we've talked about different definitions, and you'll see on the internet different definitions, but use the definition that you feel applies to the population you're going to target and the types of information you're going to target. And again, if you use a definition from a specific source, be sure to cite your source or sources. So the first is to define oral rehabilitation, is how, and specifically how you're applying that to your sessions that you're designing. Then define and describe the population that you are targeting or designing the sessions for. So just like we talked about on a previous slide, elderly or seniors, working adult population, young adults, teenage population, or pediatric. So you want to briefly define the population you're targeting, and I'd also like you to state why you chose that population, why it strikes you as particularly interesting. The next one is describe the needs of that specific population and your overall goals for the session. So over the course of these 4 sessions, my objectives are for my participants and their family members to blah, 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 blah. Okay, so I want you to think of what are your overall goals. If you had 4 sessions, you were offering 4 sessions to a group of individuals, let's say you ended up with 15 people in the course, and they come to you once a week for an hour and 15 minutes. At the end of that course, if you did a survey of them at the end, what would you hope they report to you as what they got out of the sessions that they attended? Okay, so the next part, the main part of this assignment, is the 4 separate 1 hour and 15 minute session plan. So you're going to do an outline, or actually 4 different outlines, and I require detailed outlines. Okay, I do want them in some detail, and that is going to also have points deducted if they're not detailed enough that I would feel you could actually utilize those. The reason I chose an hour and 15 minutes is that tends to, just from actually doing oral rehabilitation sessions with different populations, that's a really nice period of time because it allows people to come in, say hello to each other, get refreshments, find seating, especially if it's an elder population and there's walkers or wheelchairs, we can kind of get all arranged. If anybody needs to have an FM system connected or they need a pocket talker connected because they don't hear, that 15 minutes kind of gets us going. If it's a toddler infant session, it also gets us enough time to get the babies busy with toys and stuff before the parents can begin talking. So that seems to be a good time. So, okay, so that was for example, about the 15 minutes, refreshments and greeting. And then, so I would allot that 15 minutes for kind of greeting, refreshments, sitting down, hellos, welcome to the session, but an hour, what I want you to do is really create an hour of time. That means how much time are you going to discuss a topic? You're going to hand out handouts. Are they going to do an activity? Question and answer session. So that's a whole hour of time. Okay. Additional requirements. You must design a survey, and that needs to be at least 4 questions that you feel your participants and family members need to complete in order to structure the sessions appropriately. So basically, you would put this in really after your introduction statement, right? You would do your introduction statement, and then you would do it, the next document would be your survey. 4 questions that you feel would be helpful in designing the 4 sessions. Now, granted, you are already going to have these sessions designed. When we did these in Arizona, we actually did 6 to 8 sessions, but I didn't think that that was necessary for the purpose of this course. So what we would do was we would design the first 2 or 3, and then based on the results of the survey from the first one, then we would continue to design the others. So they were geared towards the participants' interests. Otherwise, why would they come to sessions and it was topics they weren't interested in? So here's some examples, but I don't want, I mean, you can use these 3, but I want you to think of at least one other on your own, and please change these around so you put some thought into it and don't just use my examples. The first one is, please describe why you signed up for this course. Okay, so you could take that idea and you can reconfigure that question how you like. What do you hope to obtain for participating in these sessions? That's another possibility. Of the listed topics, please rank your level of interest. So you could list different topics. Newest technology with hearing aids, assistive listening devices to help around the home and office, communication strategies, lip reading / speech reading strategies, and we'll come up with other things, but those would be examples of list of topics so that you know what their level of interest is. Okay, another requirement, and this description can actually be after your introduction, okay, because this is only going to be a paragraph. You must choose a self-assessment scale or tool that you feel would be helpful to your participant and significant others to complete. And we are going to talk about these in probably a very soon upcoming slideshow. We've already talked about some self-assessment tools related to hearing aids. So if you have a group of individuals who are hearing aid users, then that might be helpful. So this would basically be in a paragraph. So you must choose a self-assessment tool or scale or tool that you feel would be useful to your population and their significant others. In another paragraph, state in a paragraph or 2, state which self-assessment you chose, describe that self-assessment, and why you chose that specific tool for this population. You do not have to include the scale itself, okay? You don't have to turn in that document to me just by name. Then I put note, the survey of interest and the self-assessment tools can be part of session 1. Actually, let's put those right before session 1. Please submit the above information and the survey document before the session by session outline. So I know this is getting complicated, but in the introduction, at the end of the introduction, I want you to make a separate statement about what self-assessment tool you chose, describe that tool and why. And then the next document would be your survey of what 4 questions or more, if you'd like, you would ask your participants in order to tailor the sessions for their interests. Okay, if this is unclear, you're having questions about the order of things, let me know. Okay, so sessions. Each of the 4 sessions should have a breakdown of time allotted per activity, and this is just kind of a for example, okay? 15 minutes for greeting, sitting, refreshment. So each session should have an overall objective. So I want you to start on session number 1, objective for this session, or however you want to state it, and then I want that to reflect the goals you hope participants and family members achieve in that session. So what is your focus on this particular session? Again, each session should include one handout, so it has to be pertinent to the topic you're talking about. Okay, so you could really get creative with this. And on the next point, you can design your own handout or use something in your text or the internet, but you must cite your source. Okay, and then again, you definitely reference the handout in each session that you're going to include, and then you can either copy and paste it in or put it in at the end of the document, whichever you feel flows better. All right. Each session should include a component of didactic learning, right? So lecture or information giving format. So you may want to say, this is the topic we're going to discuss today. We're going to talk about different listener styles or different communication styles. So I want to talk about assertive, passive, and aggressive, and give you some examples. So you may choose that the first 20 minutes or the first 20 minutes or so are going to be lecturing on different communication styles, and then have a participant activity. Okay, that you're writing on the whiteboard, they're making suggestions. One thing that we used that was that went over very well in every session I've done was we're going to talk about communication strategies, and one of those is going to be understanding where you place yourself in a room. Right, a hearing impaired listener wants to be in a brighter lit room so that they can use visual cues. They're always going to do better, even with hearing aids, in a brighter lit room. They're going to do better if the speaker is closer to them. Of course, they're going to do better if there's less background noise. They're going to do better in a restaurant if they are not under a speaker or away from music, if they're in a quieter, better lit portion of the restaurant, if glare from a window isn't shining directly on their face or other communication partner's face. So these strategies. So sometimes what we've done in the past is maybe use a half hour to instruct them on those strategies of how to enhance your environment. And then we've cut out, of course you don't need to do this, you can describe it if you're interested. I would have the students cut out like sample living rooms, sample restaurants, sample auditoriums, and then we would put those up on the whiteboard and discuss where the best seating arrangement would be and why as a group. So that's kind of covers what I mean by first you would give the information so they understand the concept, and then you would decide and you would do an activity, and you know, you're really describing this in an outline format. Remember, you don't need to, so when I say didactic learning, you don't need to describe for pages what you're going to say. I want you to give me a few sentences about this is the concept I'll be talking to inform, and then this is the description of the activity. Okay, otherwise this would be pages and pages and pages and pages. Okay. Each session must include a handout given to the participants with the pertinent information. Okay, so you may discuss enhancing your environment, and then you might either find something on the internet or design something that you feel like, you know, I want them to take this home to solidify the concept. Okay, I want you to conclude each session with a question and answer time and to announce the topic of the next session. So that would end your outline in each session, for each session. So this is just a sample session. So your objective to give participants and their significant others an understanding of speech reading and some in-class and home practice information. 15 minutes, refreshments, greeting, recap of last session. 20 minutes, define and give an overview of speech reading advantages and realistic expectations. And then I've listed a list here. 30 minutes, activity, and then you would describe an activity that you chose to do. Reference and include handout, and then 10-minute question and answer. So this is a little bit briefer than shorter, more condensed than I want from you, but this is kind of a sample of a session outline for one of 4 sessions. your conclusion. I want you to briefly restate your objectives, what you hope to accomplish for your participants, what you hope to accomplish for family members, significant others, caregivers, and what you feel could be obtained through this experience. So you're really going to have to get creative with this. So if you put yourself in this situation, what do you think you would gain from this experience? Okay, if you led this yourself, you were doing all of this, and you were in a room of 15, 20 individuals who were listening to your expertise on this topic to gear them towards assisting them, supporting them, helping them, how do you think that you would, or do you think you would grow, or what would you experience from this? And I know you have to separate yourself from audiology, speech pathology. Okay, let's just think of this as a clinician. I mean, I know that years ago, before it was changed to screenings, we had to, as audiology students, we had to obtain a certain amount of hours actually doing therapy for speech language pathologists. And I mean, still, even doing that work, even though I was I was training as an audiologist, it really gave me another view of another profession, seeing individuals in a different light other than a diagnostic setting. So really try to think this through and put yourself in that position. If I was doing this, how would this enhance my skills, or what would I gain towards this? Okay, so really give this some thought. Okay, then of course your references. I want you to use APA style to cite your references. At least 3 different references are required, and that excludes course slides and no Wikipedia, please. The next one, this is a very useful site from Purdue University of just how to cite, especially if it's a textbook versus an internet versus an article. Okay? So that's kind of the wrap up of how to begin to work on this. Again, I wouldn't leave this to the last minute, because I think that you'll be surprised how much time that this takes to think this through, and to think of an activity, and to put together a handout. And because it's kind of a work in progress from week 1 to week 8, I really do have high expectations for this, and it is 50% of your grade. So please don't leave this to week 7.5. Work on it as we go, and hopefully already there's been things that have sparked your interest that you feel you would want to look into. And again, at any time, please email me with questions or concerns. All right, thank you.